Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to go over how Uniview's part numbering system works, some of the common and unique features of both the NVRs and the IP cameras, as well as covering some of the main points about each product group. So let's dive right in. The first thing we'll be taking a look at is the NVR part number scheme using the example below. The first three characters denote that the recorder is either an NVR or an XVR. To keep it simple, NVRs are used with IP cameras and XVRs are used with coaxial cameras. The next digit is essentially to distinguish between the model tiers. It is not a cut and dry way to determine features, but it will be either a 3 or a 5 on all models we carry, with the 3 equating to your typical commercial models and the 5 meaning it has some advanced operations, typically in the bandwidth or decoding capabilities. The next part is much simpler. It is simply the number of SATA bays that are included in the NVR, meaning the maximum number of hard drives that can be installed in the recorder. After this, we have the maximum number of recording channels on the unit. This means the maximum number of cameras that the recorder supports. This is followed by the recorder's series information. I won't go over this now because it will be covered in more depth later in the video. The next portion of the part number is the number of PoE or Power over Ethernet ports that are on the unit. If the recorder does not have a number listed here, it means it does not have any PoE ports, such as the higher channel NVRs, which instead have 2 LAN ports, allowing for dealers to install their own PoE infrastructure as a sub-network for all the cameras. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the cameras. This part actually starts off very easy. IPC is an acronym for IP cameras. So the next digit relates to the camera type, with all of the cameras having a single digit here except for turrets. Turrets are actually considered dome cameras, so they start with a 3 like the rest of the domes, but they have a secondary digit indicating that they are of the turret subtype. So the actual last number here in this section of the part number relates to the camera's resolution. The letters that appear after this number I'm actually going to skip because they relate back to a series hierarchy that's not really a good indicator of where the camera falls into the lineup. The next part shows all of the functions as well as the lens type. The portion of this section that will be referenced most often by the dealers is the lens value, which will be an F followed by 2 numbers, such as F28 in the slide, which means a fixed 2.8 millimeter lens. If it has a Z or an X, then the camera has a varifocal lens. Another thing that I've noticed is that sometimes Uniview will omit some of the camera features here, such as the metal housing, so make sure you check the spec sheet for specific functions. Okay, so the next section, if it has it, it will be a -WL, indicating that it has white LEDs. This is going to be on all of the Color Hunter models, as well as cameras that support Color Hunter mode, such as the Tri-Guard camera. If it doesn't have anything here, it means that it uses IR LEDs. After that, you will see either an I0, a -G, DL, or F, and you can see in the slide here what those different things indicate. So next we're just going to go over some of the common features that all of the recorders have on them. One of them is going to be the recording schedule. This by default is set to record 24/7, but if you would like to make cameras record on motion or have a schedule that varies throughout the day, this is the section where you would configure that. So the next portion is just going to be the on-screen display. This is where you'll set up the time date stamp to show up on the camera, as well as the camera's name and any additional text that you would like to show up on the screen. So the NPT, or Network Time Protocol, is a really great feature that's sometimes overlooked on the recorders. It's used to synchronize the date and time with your time zone, which will eliminate the need to have to manually set that on your recorder. And you can push that to all of your connected cameras using the time sync feature in the recorder. So the QR code, this portion of the NVR's menu is a really time-saving feature that eliminates the need to do any port forwarding rules in your router to gain remote access and be able to see your NVR on the app. The only prerequisite is that you do need to make sure that your NVR is connected to the network and has access to the internet. So as we move into the Uniview features, these are things that are specific to Uniview recorders or Uniview recorders that are used with Uniview cameras, as UCode is. UCode is an advanced compression algorithm used with the H.265 compression that's gotten pretty standard now on IP cameras. And what it does is it realizes what portions of the screen are dynamic and which points are static, and compresses those static images to really reduce the file size, gaining you quite a bit more time on your hard drives than you would without the feature. So the next one is going to be VCA, and you'll see VCA in the recorder's menu, and what it means is video content analysis. And it's really just the catch-all for all of the advanced features that Uniview supports. So you'll find things here like line crossing, intrusion detection, face recognition, auto tracking, heat maps. All of those types of features are all going to go under this menu option. And the good thing about these features is that you can make these push notification triggers for the app. So when you have a very specific event happen on the recorder, you can be notified through the app on your phone right away. So one of the more recent features added on by Uniview is UMD, which stands for Ultra Motion Detection. And what this is motion detection that occupies the entire screen, but will only trigger when it senses humans, vehicles, or bicycles based on the configuration that you set up when you activate this feature. It's really meant to eliminate false positives and make motion-based recording have far more impactful events when you go back on playback, eliminating things like shadows and animals and other things that you probably are not really looking for when doing surveillance recording. So the next feature is Uniview's Cloud P2P. And this feature at its core is how you can add your NVR or cameras to the app by simply scanning the QR code. But in addition to that, it's got a couple of really great things that I want to point out. The first one is that it allows you to update your firmware on all your connected devices simply by clicking a button, and it can be done remotely through the app. In addition to that, it allows you to get push notifications. So if you wanted to be push notified every time there was a line crossing event, or even if every time motion occurred on a camera, you can configure that easily through the alerts. And you can also share your devices to any other Uniview user very, very easily using this function. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is ANR, which is automatic network replenishment, which is really just a fancy way of saying that if the network connection between the camera and the NVR is lost and you've installed a micro SD card in your camera and your camera still has power when the network is lost, when the connection is remade between the two of them, the camera will send the lost footage back to the NVR after a period of time. So this is usually used when you have larger systems where the cameras are connected to their own PoE switches. And if anything happens to the network connection between the NVR and any of the PoE switches, all of those cameras will continue to record to their SD card until that network connection is regained. So going over the NVR options, the LS series is the entry-level recorder in our lineup. It is by far the cheapest recorder that we have on offer, and it does a pretty good job of giving you all of the basic features that you would need in a security system. So the next is the 501B series. These come in a 4 or 8 channel configuration. These recorders have a very powerful decoding capability, as well as UMD features and SIP features, and they can support panoramic cameras in the wide view format. So the next up is the S2 series. These come in 8, 16, and 32 channel configurations. This is a very well-rounded NVR that pretty much gives you all of the features that you would need. It has a good number of SIP channels, and it did gain that same panoramic function that the 501 series had on a recent firmware update. Now we move into the E2 series, and this recorder is actually a very powerful recorder. It comes in 8, 16, and 32 channel configurations, and the most notable thing here is going to be it has license plate recognition support and fisheye dewarping, in addition to a very high incoming bandwidth support that allows this recorder to work much better when you have a lot of high resolution cameras in your installation. So moving into the IQ series variant of the E2 models, this NVR has all of the features from the E2 series, but also gains face recognition. And what that means is that this recorder can compare faces and let you know when it thinks that there is a match based on a percentage that you configure. Next up is the 508B series. This is a 64-channel NVR with support for up to 8 internal hard drive bays. It also has a high incoming bandwidth support and support for all of the standard smart features that you would expect in a recorder of this size. I would like to point out that though I'm not going to cover any larger NVRs in this video, that Uniview does have up to 256 channel recorders available. If you need a larger NVR than what you've seen here, please contact us and we will help figure out what NVR is best suited for your project. Okay, let's move into the IP camera section. So for common features, the first one we're going to go over is day and night. A lot of people ask us if our cameras will support night mode or night vision. Every camera that we have will support both day and night modes, meaning that it will either have IR lights to allow it to switch to black and white, or it will have white LEDs such as the Color Hunter series that will allow it to stay in color 24/7. But all of our cameras will be able to see in all lighting conditions. So moving into the IP rating, this is the weather resistance of a camera. If it is an IP6 camera, that means that it is dust proof. The second digit has to do with its waterproofing. An IP66 camera means that it's highly water resistant, whereas an IP68 camera is considered waterproof. If you're purchasing a Vandal Dome, you probably have seen that it has an IK rating on the camera. And essentially what this is to show that the polycarbonate dome can take a certain amount of abuse before it is expected to break. Typically, IK10 is what you'll see listed on cameras, which is a 20 joule energy impact dissipation. So WDR is the next thing we're going to go over, and this one's a little bit tricky to understand. So on the base level of what WDR is the ability to see in a high and low contrast at the same time. And in order to do this, the camera has to equalize what the iris is opened for so that it can see both very bright and very dark areas simultaneously. Typically, an iris would adjust to just one of those two. Now, there's digital WDR, which is the cheaper way to do it and less effective. And then there is true WDR, which will typically have a dB rating associated with it. Most good true WDR cameras have 120 dB of difference that they can handle, whereas some of the more powerful ones can do all the way up to 140 decibels of difference between the bright and dark sections of the image. All WDR functions will cause some amount of washout on the camera in order to be able to see these high contrast areas at the same time. 3-axis is something that you see on a lot of cameras, and it really only relates to the installation of the camera. It means that you can adjust the camera vertically, horizontally, and adjust the horizon left and right, so that once you get a camera pointed in the general direction that you want, you can make sure that the camera appears even on the NVR. The camera lens is what determines the camera's field of view along with the CMOS ratio. So a smaller millimeter lens means a wider field of view. So a 2.8 millimeter is significantly wider than a 4 millimeter lens. A varifocal lens has the ability to be adjusted from usually a fairly wide view to a very narrow view. All of the varifocal cameras that we carry at this point have a motorized lens, meaning that you can do it through the software and you do not need to manually adjust the lens while you're installing it. So now switching gears and going into the Uniview branded features of the cameras. The first one that we're going to cover is SIP, which is Smart Intrusion Prevention. And what this is the human and vehicle detection of the cameras. So if you see a camera with SIP listed, it means that you can make line crossing intrusion detection type of scenarios that will detect specifically humans, bicycles, motorcycles, or vehicles by using some checkboxes during the configuration. All of these will be found in the VCA settings of the NVR. So on the next one, I'm going to call it Color Hunter Mode, because there is a little bit of confusion between Color Hunter cameras and cameras that support Color Hunter. Color Hunter cameras actually have improved hardware over pretty much every other camera that we sell, allowing them to have the best low light capability in the 24/7 color modes. But there is quite a few cameras that have gained Color Hunter Mode now, which means that the camera has white LEDs and the ability to stay in color all night. Just keep note of the fact that if you purchase a Color Hunter camera and a camera with Color Hunter Mode, that the Color Hunter camera will outperform that other camera. Global illumination is the menu option that controls the onboard lighting of the camera. If it has the option for smart illumination, that means that it can dim the LEDs as something moves too close to the lens to prevent that object from becoming overblown by too bright of a lighting source. Also, if you want to deactivate the onboard lighting, you would do that in this menu as well. Uniview's corridor mode is meant to address a common problem in surveillance. When you are trying to set up a camera to look down a hallway, alley, or similar corridor, you had to decide if you were going to get a varifocal camera and use a narrow field of view, or use a standard camera that would end up wasting most of the field of view on the walls. Corridor mode works by rotating the camera 90 degrees, then swaps the vertical and horizontal axis, making the field of view tall and skinny. Active deterrent is a function of the TriGuard cameras. This mode uses a combination of visual and audio deterrents to discourage someone from entering or remaining in an area. The dual light series of cameras come in either 2 and 4 megapixels, and these cameras have a selectable IR or white LED lighting mode. They also have built-in microphones and speakers. EasyStar cameras are Starlight-enabled cameras. They come in 4, 5, and 8 megapixel resolutions and are available in most common housing styles. They are illuminated with IR LEDs, and some of them even have built-in microphones. TriGuard series cameras come in 5 and 8 megapixel resolutions. They are called TriGuard because they have three main features: active deterrence, SIP, and color hunter mode. Active deterrence uses a combination of visual and audible alerts to discourage someone from entering or remaining in an area. SIP is used to accurately detect humans and vehicles and significantly reduces false positives. And Color Hunter mode can be used to keep the camera in color at all times or only when triggered by an event. Light Hunter cameras are premium cameras that have an upgraded Starlight low-light illumination hardware as well as an intelligent SoC or system on chip, meaning that it has dedicated hardware for smart features. They support SIP, face detection, and even have a new dual camera auto-tracking PTZ. Color Hunter cameras have everything that makes the Light Hunter series great, but further improve on the camera's hardware with backlight illuminated CMOS image sensors and extra-wide lens apertures. Using these hardware improvements and supplementary white LEDs allows these cameras to stay in color in all lighting conditions and provide the best picture quality 24/7.